the people of sake actually brought me into sake.
Back in 1988, this place was actually in Ginza on the main drag.
At first it was kind of soy sauce, it was miso.
To the point where it actually changed my life.
New Year's Day 1989.
Not just sake as a beverage, but all the culture and history.
Thank you for once again tuning into a brand new episode of Sake on Air, the one and only podcast that is dedicated to expanding the dialogue around Japan's iconic beverages of sake and shochu. My name is Justin Potts, one of your regular voices here on the show, and this week we are getting to know our hosts once again. Back in October, we introduced you to Sebastie Lemoine as well as Christopher Pellegrini. This week, however, we're going to introduce you to two more team members. The first being Chris Hughes, who is now arguably one of the most prolific sake educators, non-Japanese sake educators that is based here in Japan, as well as the man pulling the strings behind the scenes, Mr. Shuso Imada. Imada-san has had a very long and rich history in the industry, and it was really insightful to be able to get his perspective, not just on his own experiences, but also the different occurrences and major happenings that have really shifted the nature of the industry over the last several decades. We've been trying to keep our episodes short and sweet, but we had so much packed into these two interviews that it runs a little bit long this time around. If you would like to break up your listening a little bit, feel free to treat this as two different episodes. And if you like what you hear this week or any other week, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever streaming platform that you are enjoying Sake on Air on. With that, let's get on with the show.
So hello, this is Sebastien, your French-speaking host who's trying to try his skills at interviewing in English somebody I'm very happy to speak with today because, I mean, we're working together on this show, Sake on Air, but I haven't traveled with you much, Chris, and so I haven't had 2 hours of train to ask you
That's true, actually.
a lot of questions about yourself. I mean, what's really great about sake is it's an opportunity to meet with people, meet with new people, and what would have been the chance that I meet you? I mean, tell me where you're coming from.
So I'm coming from Great Britain. I was actually born in London, but then my family moved up to the north of England, a place called Manchester. It's one of the other major cities in the UK, and that's where I come from.
What's the gastronomy like over there?
It often kind of winds me up a little bit. People who've been to the UK often say that the food that they've had over there is kind of really bland or, tasteless, so it's not very good, And I think you just have to know where the good places are. I can say with confidence that I think the gastronomy, the cuisine in the UK is probably, at the highest level in the world. Because a lot of chefs come from other countries to come and work in the UK because they have access to all these really, really great ingredients. I can say with confidence that I think the cuisine in the UK gets a bad rap, and I'm not really sure why.
I think that's because very few people actually travel to the UK to try the gastronomy.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, did gastronomy bring you to Japan? I mean, did you come for gastronomy or why did you come
That's
here?
a great question. And I think maybe some of our, fellow hosts, maybe that was the case. But for me, I actually did not come into the sake world from either a wine background or a gastronomy background. I had a really strong interest in Japan right from an early age, about high school. I became obsessed with anime and manga, and I saw Japan on the pages of these, manga novels. And I thought one day I'm going to go there and I'm going to experience this for myself because it just looked amazing. So I went to university because when I was in college, I used to translate these manga. You could only get them in Japanese. You could only import them in Japanese. And I was following this manga series called 3 by 3 Eyes. Maybe some people listening, maybe they've read it. And if you have, you'll know what an amazing manga it is. But so they're only available in Japanese. And I wanted to be able to read these manga. So I had to learn the language.
Did you find a good one about sake?
No, sadly. I didn't. Sake never really appeared in this manga series either. But I discovered sake, like I said, not from a wine background or gastronomy background. I studied Japanese at university. And after leaving university, I had this Japanese ability. And just by complete chance, I ended up falling into the Japanese restaurant industry in London,
Mhm.
working for an importer, importing Japanese food and ingredients and beverages into London. And that's where I discovered sake.
Okay. And you remember what kind of sake it was? Or?
I do very, very well. First of all, let me say that I think like a lot of people who discovered sake for the first time, I went in there with a really negative image about sake. I just started working from this company, and everyone in kind of like their first year, because sake is one of the products that we were selling, they have to kind of have like a study session. And it turns out that I was going to have this study session with a sake brewer who would come over from Japan. I'm allowed to say the brand. I don't have to say the brand. It's Nambu Bijin, Iwate Prefecture. Anyone who's met the guy, Mr. Kuji, will know how really, really, really charismatic he is. So, there I was with this really negative impression about sake. I thought it was a spirit. I thought, it's going to be dry. It's going to be undrinkable, basically. And what he put in front of me, after a really charismatic presentation, which was just, full of Japanese culture and history, this kind of story about sake, I think that's probably he'd hooked me already. So I was an easy sell. But then he put out this sake in a wine glass, and it was a Tokubetsu Junmai. Nambu Bijin's Tokubetsu Junmai. It's a pretty famous product. It's, it's what sake, tastes like. It's kind of like the traditional taste of sake, but with lots of fruity and floral notes. And it's very delicate, very elegant. And bearing in mind what my image of sake was, this just completely blew me away.
I'm salivating, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember when I tasted it, because I was like, after I heard this presentation, I was, okay, the sake world is really interesting. I could get into this. If only this in the glass tastes half as good as the kind of the presentation, then I think that's it. I'm probably going to get into this industry.
Did you mean that you actually came into the world of sake before visiting Japan?
No, actually, I'd already visited, because when I was in university, when you study Japanese at university in the UK, it would be very rare for you to not actually get the opportunity to visit the country, because normally 1 year of the course is actually spent in the country. But I was actually very lucky to get an opportunity to go to Japan on like a summer course in my first year in university. So I'd actually been to Japan three times before I started working for this food and drink importer in London.
So that's been how many years now?
So the first time I actually visited Japan, I remember it very, very well. It was the World Cup. The World Cup was being held jointly but with Korea. Mm-hmm. And I think that was 2001 or 2002.
Yeah.
Well, 2001, I think it was. Completely forgotten. Time flies, and then my memory's going. But yeah, I think it's 2002.
I remember France 1998.
Yeah.
So must be
2002. Yeah, it would have been 2002. It's the summer of 2002. My first ever Japanese summer. I arrived in the sweltering heat.
I mean, I actually love your avatar name on Instagram or on Facebook. Sake no Tabibito.
Oh, thank you.
For our listeners, I mean, it means sake traveler, but actually maybe sake pilgrim.
Exactly. That's the translation I'm going for.
I remember the first time I met you, you briefly talked to me about one of your projects, which was to travel the country and make a book out of it. And about sake.
Right.
So, I mean, tell us about it.
Yeah, I only got part of that done, sadly. So I worked for this food importer for like 4 years. And then I really wanted to reanalyze how much passion I had for sake. I wanted to just, take 2 years out of the industry, go and do something completely different. So that's what I did. I actually ended up working for Daihatsu, not the car company. They actually, when they started making engines for big tanker ships. And so I worked for Daihatsu in the diesel, the European arm of their diesel engine company, selling parts for diesel engines, which they sold to ship owners. And, so after working for this company, it allowed me to kind of, save a bit of money away. And then I realized that I was really missing the sake industry. I knew probably the first week into that job, this was not a good idea.
Nice.
I'm really going to miss the sake industry. And so after 2 years, I'd been working in London for 6 years, saying one day I'm going to go back to Japan. And I said, the time's come. And so answer your question. No, it's a long way around. I decided I'm going to go to Japan. I'm going to get a working holiday visa. I'm going to go to Japan. I'm going to visit all these breweries that I've always wanted to visit. I'm going to do, maybe 100 breweries, something like that. And I'm going to write a book or make a website. Actually, I wasn't going to write a book. I was going to make like a website with a map on that you could use to find all these breweries, find out more about them. And sadly, I never really got the website up. I'm actually really disappointed in myself about that. But it doesn't mean that it still couldn't happen. But I did manage to get around 80 sake breweries in the 1 year.
Not bad.
That's not bad.
That's
yeah.
It's
all right.
Week,
yeah.
So, I mean, you're not going back into the food import industry at the moment, I understand. So tell us, what are you doing now?
So I was working for a shop in Tokyo Station, Hasegawa Sakiten, it's called. Pretty famous, chain of sake shops, specialist sake shops.
Yeah, great address for those who are here.
Yeah,
and want to,
if you want to go out and you want to go,
sake.
Buy high quality sake. We can't recommend these shops enough. So I worked for like 2 months in a part-time job. And during my time at that shop, just as I was thinking of leaving, actually, very often what would happen is sake breweries would come over and they would do like little sales demonstrations at this shop. And a brewery called Tatsunokawa Shuso was doing a sales demonstration. And I got a tap on the shoulder, just as I was there stocking the shelves. And the guy there, Togami, who's the manager for overseas sales at the time, he just asked me, like, what are you doing here? Why is a British guy working here? And I got an opportunity to kind of tell my story. And the rest is history, I guess. They asked me to come and work for them. And I think that is the main reason. The fact that I got the opportunity, that's the main reason that I didn't just go back to the UK and work for an importer over there.
So what are you doing?
Well, what I'm doing now is I work for that brewery for a year. Actually, more for that as a domestic sales guy. I was working in department stores, giving sales demonstrations to Japanese customers, because I'm really tall and I stand out a mile. They really wanted to exploit that, I think. So I was stood there in department stores, and you get these kind of old people coming over and going, "Oh, you want to try your sake? It looks really interesting." And so it was kind of fun. I got to, use my knowledge and marketing skills, and so I did that for a year. But I saw the opportunity with the Olympics and with the World Cup. I saw the opportunity to actually promote sake overseas from inside Japan. Number one. Number two, I didn't really want to be tied to just one sake brewery. I wanted to see more of the industry as a whole. I wanted the freedom to go out and kind of do all kinds of different jobs. I really wanted to make the most of my time in Japan. And, one thing and another, I got a job opportunity to work for Kurand, which is they're run by a company called Liquor Innovation. And basically, it's kind of like a string of all-you-can-taste bars. You just go there, and there's tables and, chairs and a fridge full of 100 different types of sake. And people go there, bring their own food, and you can just kind of like leisurely taste all sorts of different types of sake. And I now work for Kurand in a kind of freelance capacity. And basically, I would say that sake is very much my side job. Working in the sake industry here is quite difficult for a non-Japanese person, I would say. That's not because there's any discrimination or anything like that. It's just that there aren't really many jobs for us to do here that are already set up. You have to kind of create your own work, if you like. So what I've started to do is kind of market myself and market my skills and my knowledge. And right now, because of the Olympics and, the Rugby World Cup, there's a lot of different opportunities coming from here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I was expecting that the word would come out earlier, but I see you as a great sake educator, actually.
Yeah, that's kind of a recent development, I have to say. So about 2 years ago now, in 2000 and end of 2016, I was attending a sake event, and a very nice lady and a very, very, very important and influential person in the sake industry, a Japanese lady called Hiraidi Toshie. She came over and, asked me how I'm doing. And it's funny, actually, at that time, I was almost wondering if it might be time to go back to the UK. And, I was telling my story, and I think she was worried maybe that I was going to leave. And she said, Chris, WSET is coming to Japan. And I'd been waiting for this moment. I already knew who WST were because of my links with various people in London who set this course
You
up.
have to tell us. The
Okay,
full
so
name.
WSET is an abbreviation for a Wine, Spirits and Education Trust. And they offer a wine qualification that is probably, one of the most respected qualifications in the world. It's a prerequisite if you want to be a judge on the International Wine Challenge panel. So yeah, they set up this sake course. They set up a sake course in 2014. Anthony Moss and Kikuya Natsuki, who we've already had on the show, set that up. And I was waiting a long time. I was like, when's this coming to Japan? Because I knew I wanted to be the one to teach this. So in 2016, Hiraide Toshie, she said, yeah, well, I'll put you forward. I'll recommend you. So would you like to become an educator? And then I went to Kyoto and did the educator's course. And I've been teaching it ever since.
So, what's sake in your daily life today? How much of it do you drink?
Probably not enough. Maybe it might surprise you. I don't drink it every day. I'm conscious about the negative impact on my health, and I try to avoid drinking it excessively. I do end up tasting a lot of sake in my job, but when I go out in Japan, at night, and even if it's not a Japanese izakaya, I always ask, is there a sake on the menu? I always try and, order sake if I can, and I love it.
Do you cook at home?
No, I don't really cook.
No.
I have to confess. Maybe I should get into that. I can. I cook a mean oyakodon. But, my girlfriend does most of the cooking.
So what are your dreams? For yourself and for sake, maybe?
I just want for sake to be something that everyone is drinking without any kind of misconceptions. Not something that you have to introduce to people. It's something that people ask you for. I think once we get to that stage, then we will have an official sake boom. But right now, we've still got a very long way to go. But that's my dream, yeah. And I think it can happen, definitely.
Is there a particular sake type that you like or that you like to talk about?
And you know what? I think I would have answered this differently just a year ago, actually. Recently, I'm really starting to like the more quirky, idiosyncratic flavors.
How do you define quirky?
So, these sake that have kind of got a bit of oxidation in them.
Okay.
And where you're really bringing out the flavors of the rice, and you get all these amazing caramel and toffee flavors in there. And that's completely different to what I was drinking just a year ago. Just a year ago, I was drinking the more fruity and floral types, like the daiginjo. But I'm starting to gravitate more towards jinmai that have had hardly any polishing and that have got that little bit of kind of oxidized touch to them.
When you work for the brewery, you probably spend some time helping the brewers, learning about the process. Is brewing sake one of your dreams?
Well, so as you quite rightly said, my first kind of experience brewing sake was kind of a training, if you like. Yeah. When I worked for Tatenokawa Shuso, they invited me up to the brewery to sort of spend a week trying my hand at various different parts of the process, and that includes the boring parts as well, like bottling, where it's very therapeutic, but it's quite boring. It's mainly just kind of manual labor. But I did get to go into the brewery and a whole day, and they've got rid of the Toji system, so they just kind of have like a foreman, if you like. But a very nice guy, and he said in the morning on that day, Chris, just tell me what you want to try. You can go into the koji room, you can stir the mash, you can do whatever you want. And so I did. I spent the whole day trying my hand at absolutely everything. I spent like an hour in the koji room, and it was so much fun. It wasn't hard work at all, but I know they were going easy on me. And I know that, that was a very soft introduction into sake brewing. I've had a little bit more experience more recently. Marumoto Shuso in Okayama. I got to know Marumoto Shuso in London. And I'm very, very good friends with the CEO, and he's always emailing me, asking me to go down and visit. And they said, why don't you come down and just help us with a bit of brewing and come and watch? And what I love about sake brewing is that every brewery does their brewing just a little bit different. So you always learn something new. It's
Yeah.
always very different.
I mean, that was one of my questions. I mean,
Yeah.
you visited 80 different places. What fascinated you about them?
Oh, so different. Also different from just like arriving and seeing the front of the brewery. You know, you've got these breweries that are out in the kind of more municipal areas, surrounded by local housing, you know, residential housing. Then you've got these breweries which are out in the middle of the mountains, you know, or out in the middle of the countryside. And I would say, like, just going and seeing how the shop front, if you like, of all these breweries is so different. When I was visiting these breweries, I have to say, I often visited them in the summer months when they aren't brewing, so you can't actually see any brewing. And even so, it was just so interesting. You know, I mean, the brewery tour itself was pretty short. But then, if the brewery is growing their own rice, you get to go out in the fields and see them, you know, how they grow their rice and just the architecture of the brewery. And a lot of breweries have these little museums and things that you can go and visit.
The tools and the tools that you can see.
Yeah, the tools as well. Yeah. Every brewery was so different. And the other, I mean, a lot of these breweries that I was visiting, I already knew the owner or the people working there, someone working there quite well. So they looked after me. You know, I got a sort of quite special tour, got to go out and eat with the owner or the toji or whatever afterwards at their local izakaya. And it's just a very personal experience, you know. And of course, they tell me their story. A lot of what I learned about sake in the early days was not from textbooks or the internet. It was really just from the brewers firsthand, and it was a great privilege, I think.
You've got some great stories to tell. I mean, is there one in particular that you'd like to talk about? One that surprised you?
Yeah, there are so many. I mean, like, I was really surprised to learn of sake's deep link with No theater.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tell me about
I
it.
learned that on a visit to a brewery in Tochigi Prefecture, Watanabe Shuso.
Okay.
And we were talking about how, like, sake has different links in Japanese culture and things like that, how it's intertwined with Japanese culture. And out of the blue, I think he just said, yeah, our sake used to be enjoyed in a local No performance or something. Did you know that sake was something that was enjoyed while watching No? And it's a very kind of common part of sake culture. No, I didn't, you know. Just little things as well, like maybe you've heard that they often play music to the moromi, right? Because maybe there's no kind of scientific proof, but some people think that maybe the sound waves kind of, you know, influence the moromi.
I can believe that.
So they used to sing a song, right, when they were brewing.
Yeah.
And now some breweries play music like jazz or rock. And I went to a brewery in Gifu Prefecture, and I learned they play kabuki to their moromi. How cool is that?
Great story.
All these different links with different parts of Japanese culture.
Yeah, great
So
story.
cool. But, you know, one of the best stories I heard early on, which still I think is probably one of the best sake stories I've ever heard, is, I mean, a lot of our listeners will have heard of the brand Dassai. We're allowed to mention the brand Dassai. Can I get away with it for just this one show? And, you know, it's not the be-all and end-all of sake, so don't just go out and drink Dassai. But their story is fantastic. And it's like, so their name translates to Otter Festival. And I learned that the reason for this naming is that then it's named after a poet who I think is from the area. It's Masaoki Shiki, isn't it? He's a very famous poet. And the story goes that he was very untidy person. And when he was making music or poems, he used to scatter his notes about in his room. And in a similar way that otters scatter their fish on the riverbanks. And it looks like, to people, it looks almost as if the otters are kind of having a festival. And that's where the naming comes from. It kind of has a local link, and it also has this kind of dreamy image of otters scattering the fish on the riverside. And I just thought, wow, there are those kind of stories in sake. And it's really the stories that hooked me. You know, every time I was trying to sell a brand of sake in the UK, I'd always go to the brewer and I'd say, look, tell me your story. Give me a story to sell to people, you know, to sell this brand. Because to people who aren't Japanese, you know, I mean, the label is all in Japanese. You know, it's like hieroglyphics, isn't it? You can't read the label. There's nothing to associate, to relate with. And I think that relatability is really important. It's all part of education as well.
And when you're not drinking sake, and you're not drinking sake all the time, we heard, what do you do in Japan? And what's
a lot of the time, well, you know, obviously I work here. one of my hobbies, I guess you're asking, right? So actually, I like mystery novels. And I haven't read any in a while, actually, but I really like mystery novels. And I'll tell you something. I think in the UK, so we are one of the countries that created this so-called golden age of mystery. It's a type of mystery where you have a central character who's doing a kind of mundane job, a mundane type of profession, who also happens to be a sleuth. And he'll be in, this is silly, but he'll be put into a situation where there's a murder or some kind of mystery. And he has this amazing brain and he's able to solve these, mysteries. And I really love that. So, and the thing about Japan is that it didn't grow out of this golden age of mystery, and they still have a lot of different series running. So if you really like this type of mystery, there are plenty of novels that you can go out and buy. So I recently found, it's a manga, but I recently, there's a manga series called Kindaichi Shonen. Kindaichi Shonen is basically, it's a mystery series. The central character, it starts off as a high school kid. He's got an amazing brain, like he's a genius. And he basically solves these mysteries. And now they've grown the series. So they've kind of gone through, as he gets older, they've kind of released different series. So we're at kind of, he's in his 30s now, and he's working for a company, but he's still solving these mysteries. But anyway, they recently released a story in a brewery, in a sake brewery. So a murder happens in a sake brewery. And it's funny because I was thinking about 2 years ago, I was thinking of writing my own. Like, I was thinking of writing a mystery series where the central character is a sommelier or a sake brewer or something who actually solves mysteries in his kind of... But I approached a brewer once with this idea, and they didn't really kind of take to it very positively. It was kind of, don't really want murders happening in breweries. So I was like, okay, I won't do that.
You have to put the reference on the bottom of our website or next post about this particular interview.
Yeah.
I'll go and get it.
Yeah. It's
great.
It's
I
great.
have a job for you, is to bring Natsuko no Sake to the UK.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. So this is a manga series. I haven't actually read it, I have to confess. There's a lot of manga you can read about sake. I mean, probably I think I recommended it in a previous show, but one of the best that really taught me a lot about sake, actually, scientific stuff and technical stuff as well, is Moyashimon, which is it's basically a manga about fermentation.
Haven't read it.
It doesn't focus too heavily on sake, but there are about 3 volumes that delve really deep into sake. And the way they explain some of the process is fantastic. Have pictures, things in pictures.
Did it influence the way you teach
sake?
It
did. It influenced the way I teach Yamahai. Because I only ever really taught Yamahai and Kimoto how it's kind of written in textbooks. So, it's all about keeping the bad bacteria out. The way Moyashimon teaches Yamahai and Kimoto is a battle between all these different microbes, a battle for survival. And it actually draws it out as a battle. And that's how I teach Yamahai and Kimoto now. Makes it so much easier to understand.
So Chris, let me make one thing clear. Had you discovered sake in Japan before diving into the sake world?
Now, this is something that always surprises a lot of people. And it's a question that I asked a lot. And no, actually, I had never discovered sake in Japan. It's really weird. I often think back, like, how did I not discover sake in Japan? I mean, we're in there 2 months, and then a year, and then 2 months again. Like, why? I'd had awamori, and I'd had shochu, but I still didn't know what sake was. I still hadn't had sake. The thing is that I ended up discovering sake first through Chinese restaurants or, like kind of pseudo-Japanese restaurants. If you go out into the countryside in the UK, it's still the case now, actually, in some places. We have Japanese restaurants, but they're run by Chinese, or not Chinese, maybe they're run by local people who have a kind of distorted image about what Japanese cuisine should be or what a Japanese restaurant should be, and the menu is the same. So you have things on the menu that are labeled as certain things which aren't, and sake is one of those. So I remember going out to a restaurant with my Japanese teacher during university, and sake was served at the restaurant. And I don't know what the hell that was, but it was terrible. Really, really, really bad. I'm not going to name the restaurant. I don't even know if it still exists, but just completely ruined any chance of me discovering sake at that point.
What is your first memory of Japan, or what was your first contact with Japan, the country?
Yeah, I'll never forget it. So, I arrived jet-lagged into Nagoya Airport in June 2002, and I'd booked a ryokan, and actually I recommend to anyone who's going to Japan for the first time, just dive straight into Japanese culture. Get yourself a ryokan booking. They're fantastic. So anyway, I had to find this ryokan. And I don't know why. I decided to pick a ryokan with a name I couldn't pronounce. I'd still not mastered. This was like in my first year of Japanese study. I still hadn't mastered the hu. The hu. It's kind of like the fu sound in Japanese. It's kind of like a cross between an H and an F. But if you get it wrong, people can't understand you. So I walked out of the airport. And I don't know why. I decided to ask this kind of Yakuza-looking guy, this old guy kind of stood. He was friendly enough. And I said to him with my very, very basic Japanese, I got a book, like a guidebook with basic sentences in, and I'd mastered like nani nani wa doko desu ka? Where is such and such place? So I said in my best Japanese, I still remember the name of the ryokan. It was Ichifuji Ryokan. And it's like Ichifuji is the way you would pronounce it. But I said Ichifuji to this Japanese guy. I said, Ichifuji ryokan wa doko desu ka? And he just looked at me like I just asked him to kill himself or something, the death stare. And then this is the best put down line you will ever hear. If you go to a foreign country, this is what you don't want to hear. He said, お前、日本語下手やんな. And that was it. It was like,
which basically means your Japanese is very poor.
Yeah, it means basically your Japanese is terrible. And if in manga when when something like happens and the character kind of just like goes like, you get that sound dong, and the character just like kind of got a blue color. That's basically what happened to me. I did find the ryokan after a little bit of better pronunciation, asking some slightly more friendly kind of people.
You were very motivated to run some of our early podcasts about terroir, about pairing in particular. I mean,
crazy.
Why attracts you with pairing in particular?
So food pairing has become a massive part of my work. And one thing that I didn't really possess as a skill to begin with, naturally, is tasting, I have to say. I wasn't a very good taster to begin with, probably because I didn't have the wine background. Tasting was always difficult for me. Like I would go to breweries. In my first year here, I would be visiting breweries, and I was just really struggling to make tasting notes for sake. And one thing that WST has helped me to do is to make tasting notes productively, right? In a kind of a systematic way. And I mean, food pairing in general, I think working for the brewery for a year, I did a lot of events like in restaurants and things, and food pairing would come up a lot then. I can't quite put my finger on exactly at what point kind of food pairing became a massive part of my role, but it's a massive part of my role. And I don't know anything about, I didn't know anything about food pairing. And so for me, it was just any opportunity to study about food pairing and sake, any opportunity to experience food pairing and sake. And I just think it's the most exciting, most interesting, most unexplored part of working in the sake industry right now.
And the story needs to be written.
Yes, the story needs to be written. The book needs to be written,
yeah, the
right?
Book needs to be
if we
written.
need a book, maybe we don't need a book. Maybe it'll take some other form. But that's where the real potential for sake is. So we have to go down that rabbit hole. We have to go down those rabbit holes, and we have to explore more about food pairing. So I'm really looking forward to maybe doing a part 2 food pairing episode, because I've discovered a lot of things after doing that.
I think we're getting toward the end of this interview. Is there something special that you want to say to our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I discovered sake by sort of having someone, give this really charismatic presentation, tell me about the story of sake, tell me about the culture, the history. And I think that's the best way to discover sake. So if you haven't discovered sake yet, and it's kind of been putting you off in some way or other, a bit frightened to try it, just go out there and discover the story of sake. Get someone to tell you the story of sake, and then give it a try.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Rebecca Wilson-Lai, and to my right is Shuso Imada, the General Manager of JSS Information Centre, and one of the quiet heroes behind the scenes at Sake on Air. And it's my great pleasure to be interviewing Mr. Shimada today, because while you might not be hearing so much of him on the interviews and the segments that we put together, he really is the mover and shaker behind the scenes. He's the man that guides us and with his wisdom and knowledge allows us to make Sake on Air available for you all. So, good evening, Mr. Imada.
Yeah, good evening.
Can I call you Imada-san? That's much more natural for me. So it's, as I said, it's a real delight to be able to sit down with you tonight, and because I'm actually really curious to know more about you, about your journey through this glorious world of sake and shochu, and just to know a little bit more of your background. Who is the man?
Wow.
Shuso Imada. Wow. So let's begin. Born in Tokyo in 1960.
Yeah.
So you're actually a Tokyo native, which is quite rare these days, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. Tokyo is a big city. There are many Tokyo natives.
Most people, like the person sitting on the left of you, came from other places, though.
Well, my origin, my father was born in Tokyo, but my grandfather is from Hiroshima, so.
Oh.
And my mother is also from Hiroshima, so maybe half of me are Hiroshima.
Quick question. Imada.
Yeah.
Imada Shuso, Hiroshima.
Yeah.
Is there a connection there?
Well, yeah, that's where my grandfather was born. And, well, his elder brother has succeeded the brewery, and now his granddaughter works as a president, also as a toji of the Imada Shuso Brewery.
So for keen-eared listeners, you've probably worked out what I'm talking about. For those that might not make the connection, we're talking about fukucho, which is a wonderful sake brewed by Imada Shuso in Hiroshima. And the toji, or the master brewer, Miho Imada, is a pioneering female master brewer, and she's doing really wonderful things, isn't she?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I've known her for many years.
It's funny that the sake world is a very, very small world indeed, isn't it?
Well, that's right. It often happens.
So let's start with where we are now. We're in the JSS Information Centre, and you're the general manager of this. Can you tell us a little bit about what your work is at the JSS Information Centre?
Well, JSS stands for Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association, which is a sort of central organization of about 1,700 sake breweries and shochu distilleries. And we do, central things like promoting the industry itself, doing lots of seminars in the technical fields, also buying rice from the agricultural.
I think sake brewers would say that is definitely one of the most important parts of what the Sake and Shochu Makers Association does. And
that's right.
I think people see the events and they think, oh, wow, the Makers Association puts on lots of great events, but that work that they do is essential in the community of sake and shochu, isn't it?
Well, very important part of it, I think.
So you're at the information centre, and we can see a lot of information, obviously, that's not in Japanese. So can you tell us about the...
Okay. Well, this place is quite small, but located in a very central of Tokyo, in the neighborhood from a very core stations like Shimbashi and Toranomon. So you have a very good access to here. And it's small, but has all the information about sake and shochu world, including the information of the breweries. And also, we usually have about 100 items to taste. So many of the people who visit here come here to visit. Taste several sake and shochu.
It's definitely a place that must be on one's bucket list when they come to Tokyo.
Yeah,
I think
so.
It's a place to come and enjoy sake from across Japan,
That's
from
right.
Hokkaido down to Okinawa, I'm
That's
sure,
right, that's right.
and gather information from every single brewery and prefecture in
Mhm.
between. It really is an incredible, not only place to, as you say, taste sake, but also gather information
yeah.
as well.
Experience sake is quite difficult for the people if you don't come to this kind of place. If you just go to izakaya and see the menus, there are so many of it, and there's so many, types of sakes, and from so many different regions. So it's hard for many people to compare or understand about its,
It's diversity. It's such a
That's
diverse
right,
market, isn't
that's
it?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, it's a wonderful place for non-Japanese
Mhm.
to come and feel comfortable.
Well, I want this place to be like that because this is a gateway for, both domestic and international people to learn about sake. So most of the menus and every signs are made with Japanese and English.
And you do also the Sake 2020 project seminars here as well, don't you?
Oh, that's right. Well, Sake 2020 project is, different from Sake Makers Association of Japan, Sake and Chochu. But it's a kind of volunteer activities to promote sake, to make a basement for infrastructure for the foreigners to enjoy sake and chochu until the year of 2020.
So for those who haven't been fortunate enough to attend a Sake 2020 project event, they are seminars with usually one sake brewery. Is that
That's
correct?
right. That's right.
And the presentation, can you tell us about that?
Presentation of all the breweries to tell the stories about the brewery, the histories and secrets about the brewery.
Fascinating.
That's right. Which is
Yeah.
most interesting for many people.
And it's all in English. Well,
That's right.
sometimes the
That's
brewer is
point.
speaking Japanese, but there is translation provided.
That's right. They're a good bilingual person like you and Justin, Chris.
And
I'm
Chris,
here.
yeah. Well, actually, all the team.
Mhm.
We rotate, so someone's chopping carrots one
That's
week, someone's pouring glasses, someone's
right.
presenting. So it's a really great forum. So I'd just like to make a little plug for what you're doing with that, because that's also another wonderful opportunity for an international community to join and
That's right.
get involved in sake education.
Well, actually, the event was called Sake Salon, and it was during that event that we first came to think about, talk a bit about this Sake on Air project, because there are so many. The international members who helped the event were so talented, knowledgeable about sake, and looking at them being here, we thought that we can do something else.
Well, it's actually thanks to you that this all came about. It's really fortunate that we're able to share your story with the wider Sake on Air community and get to know a little bit more about you. So let's go back to Tokyo 1960.
Okay.
So
My
you
history.
experienced the first Olympics in Tokyo.
That's right.
Am I right?
1964, when I was 4. I was going to my kindergarten there.
So I'm curious about that time, 1960s, 1970s.
Well,
I'm actually fascinated by
Japan
that
was-
period of history.
Japan was quite different then. Not as wealthy like these days. So, it's a world of black and white pictures
Mhm.
in my memory, because things are not so colorful then. Everything is not so colorful. Wooden houses all over. Well, I was living quite in the middle of Tokyo, close to Nihonbashi. It's quite the center of Tokyo, but still around my house, all the houses were wooden made, not fancy like now.
Sounds
No
idyllic to
building.
me. I don't know.
Well, my father built a 3-floor building, which is not big, but from the top of the building we can see Tokyo Tower and Mount Fuji there. Then that's impossible now,
Wow.
because there are no buildings around. 3 floors building was the highest. around.
Amazing.
So
Wow.
that's the time.
What a precious memory to have.
Well,
It's a poor life. Man, it's a good memory though.
I'm curious what your experience of sake was in the 60s and 70s growing up in Tokyo in those days.
Actually, I didn't have a very good image about sake when I was young. I've been grown up in my grandfather, as I told you, was a son of the brewery in Hiroshima. And our family business, he came to Tokyo to sell their products. And he started a retail shop and then moved to a wholesaler. So I was born as a son of the sake wholesaling company. So I've always been surrounded by sake.
Again, sounds idyllic to me.
Well,
but how was that to you?
That's many people say, but for small children like me, being in the middle of sake is not such a happy thing because, I didn't know what sake tastes like. I have no idea about how being drunk is, so I just saw the people who drink sake every day and get drunk and speak in a loud voice. That's scary to a small children like me at that time. So I and my elder sister, hide away.
Hid away from the scary sake drinkers.
That's right. That's often happened. So that makes me feel bad image about sake.
And did that negative image continue?
Well, continue quite a long time, I think,
right.
until I get an adult.
Right. I would think that sake was the dominant alcoholic beverage of choice. Is that true?
When I was small, the top share, of course, was sake, more than beer.
Right.
Beer was more expensive thing.
Wow.
Well, it's changed now, but
sake was very much a part of daily life. Was it a part of your family? I mean, other than the business, for example, was it on the dinner table when you had meals, or?
Well, maybe in many family things goes like that. But in my family, both my grandfather and father couldn't take any alcohol. It's like an allergy kind of thing. So they didn't drink almost any. They taste. Because that's their job. They taste every day, but they spit everything out. And I never saw them drinking alcohol on in the dinner table.
I suspect they probably had a very good business then.
Well, it's, people says they said it's better not to be, able to drink, because if you like sake and drink so much, you always taste it for their preference and can't look at this very objectively.
What was your drink of choice when you started to become an adult drinker?
Yeah, wine.
Right. Why not sake?
Because I didn't have a good image of sake.
Still, 20
and
yeah.
Also, sake at that time didn't taste so good, maybe as now. So I was forced to drink, and I drank a lot. And for my quite younger age, my father and my grandfather let me taste sake. So I knew how sake tastes like, maybe more than everybody else.
Yeah.
But still, I didn't have such a good image of it.
It was the boom era. That was when sake was riding high there. And then, during that time, brewers were making money and were able to invest in new technology to make more premium sake.
When sake breweries are rich, there are two directions. One goes to there's kind of high technique or high, way of reserving things, but many of them thought about producing more and more, big production, because the economy was growing. They thought about making more and more.
Right. So instead of investing in elevating
the
quality, it was about investing in technology that could make you produce more.
Yeah. That was a tendency at the time of the year, I think.
Right.
I remember.
Right. But I'd like to just go back to your resume a little if I can, because I believe that you graduated from the Hito Sebastie University Law Department. And you went to work at Nippon Steel Corporation, which doesn't sound like a sake distributor or a sake brewery,
That's right.
Imada-san.
Yeah, good.
What was going on there?
Well, because I told you, as I told you, I was not too much interested in sake.
You
and
really didn't like it, obviously.
Yeah, and I was not a strong drinker also. So I studied what I wanted. I studied international law, and I wanted to be a diplomat and work for the United Nations kind of thing. And well, I was saying that I didn't study so much, so I didn't pass the exam for being a diplomat. So that's why I went to Nippon Steel Corporation, which looked for me is very far away from the sake industry.
So is that why you can speak English?
Well, yeah, I've always been interested in language. I don't know where I learned my English, but I studied 1 year in the United States, going to university.
Amazing. You're a genius. You went 1 year at university and you came back fluent. I've been here for 14 years, still struggling with hello sometimes.
In my younger days, I was singing in a band, and I was a vocalist, so I have to learn by heart every lyrics. And
What kind of, was it a rock band?
That's a rock band. It's a progressive rock band.
Imada-san, the secrets are coming out. We need to know more about this. No, come on, pray tell. Tell us about the rock band. What was its name?
Well, the band's name was East Wind.
East Wind.
East Wind was the name of the band. And we played music like Pink Floyd. And
Did you have long hair? Did you have a ponytail?
wow, no. I mean, money, time, money. And we played many tunes from ES, the band ES.
Amazing.
And ES has a very, very long lyrics. So I had to learn everything by heart and practiced how to sing it in
So
English.
you were vocals, and did you play an instrument as well?
A little piano.
A little piano.
Yeah, there is another keyboard player. So sometimes I play piano.
Amazing. Do you still play music?
Well, once in a while. But
We
not
are
in front of
totally
you.
making that happen. Stay tuned for the next live concert of East Wind, the
East Wind.
reunion special coming live from the JSS Information
Thank
Centre.
you.
We are totally making that happen. So, wow. So you were interested in music.
Yeah, I like many things, but mainly music, and I like to paint. So I did lots of paintings. At
What
my high
what
school
style
days.
are you? Sort of portraiture or landscapes? What kind of-
I like the portrait.
Mhm.
I like to draw human,
Right.
and yeah, lots of
Any
illustrations.
influences? Any artistic influences that particularly appealed to you?
Well, at first a lot from this impressionist thing, but I love lots of modern arts.
Japanese artists as well?
Not
Or
too
more
much.
international?
Yeah, I think it's more international.
Well, what we're sort of hearing, and I think it's a very common thread
Mm-hmm.
through this part of your life, is that in the sort of 80s, you were very much looking out from Japan
Mm-hmm.
to the
I
rest of
think
the
so.
world. Would you say that's right?
I think so. I was more interested in looking outside of Japan than looking inside of Japan, I think so. That's a tendency of my generation, I think, compared to my children generation.
So would it be too much of a stretch to say that this generation, it's like me from New Zealand, I'm so used to New Zealand, it's all I've ever known, that I just spent my life looking away from it, looking at the rest of the world.
Japan
And
is also a small country.
right. And so would you say that perhaps not just looking away from Japan, but maybe looking away from Japanese traditional culture and art
I think so.
was also part of that?
I think so. Well, because that's the history of modern Japan. I think Japan has always been pursuing the culture of the Western countries after the World War II. I think to catch up with them was the slogan for most of the Japanese people, and I'm the end of that generation, I think.
And now it's kind of gone full circle, and this generation seems to be looking back to Japan.
I think so. It's because, well, there has been a shift change, to see outside of Japan. And, well, there's a shift change that we have realized what we have. There was a timing for us to look back inside of us.
Well, if I look at your resume once again, there was a sort of a look back, a return for you, because after your time at Nippon Steel, you became a board member at your family's distribution company.
Yeah,
so you actually went back to sake. What brought that about?
Well, because I was the only son, and there is nobody who can succeed the business. So my father always look at me seriously and in a serious tone. What would you do? So
it was duty calls, family duty calls.
That's right.
So you returned
answer.
You returned to the family company, and you merged with another company, I believe.
Oh yeah. In about 2002 or 4, our company was merged with a same style wholesaling company, which is called Ota Shoten, and became a little larger scale company.
How was the sake industry at that time?
It's a turning point. So our company mainly pursued the sake, which is the brewery, which is not very big and have a good quality type of sake. So those breweries has been increasing at that time too. At the same time, many of the big, huge companies began to
go into decline. And so I'm curious though, because now we are here, and during that time, going back into the family business, was it there that you had your sake reawakening?
That's interesting for me too. Looking back, I've always, even after succeeding my family business, I wasn't too much interested in sake, and I started by studying wines at first, and I got a wine advisor certification at first. After maybe about 20 years of my job, I coincidentally drank sake, Yukinobosha, which is from Akita Prefecture.
I remember when I first drank that too. I think everyone's got a Yukinobosha story. Tell me yours.
Well, as I told you, I wasn't a very strong drinker. I couldn't drink so much. But first time I drank that Yukinobosha, I could drink easily this 1 cup, which is about ichigo, maybe
180
milliliters. And I didn't get bad. I mean, I was quite surprised that I could drink that much without any difficulty.
Do you remember the flavor or the expression of it? Was that also a standout for you?
Actually is a Yamahai Junmai with a black label. Do you know that? And I had a feeling the feeling I had was that the sake was very, very mild, smooth, and soft, which I couldn't live together with sake, but for that sake, I could go along with it without any difficulty. That's the feeling I had about sake.
Your awakening came from Yukinobosha, and how did that develop and become the turning point for you?
Yeah, being able to drink sake is quite different from just tasting sake and evaluating sake. Before that I was evaluating. I had a good, tongue and nose, so I was pretty good at tasting and evaluating things. But it's interesting, but not enjoyable. But once you can drink sake, the world totally changed for me. So I started, really tasting it, enjoy drinking other sakes, slowly but surely. And then I began to find very different aspect of sake, I think, in a good way. And after that, I just have been drinking. And someday, I mean, I was surprised to find myself drinking only sake and not wine. So totally my favorite has changed.
So what is your association with sake now? Not technically for a description of sake, but more of a, what does the sake world mean to you?
My meeting with sake was, quite when I was old. It's not any, too much passionate kind of love. It's more stable. So my association with sake is pretty good aged couple like kind of thing.
Comfortable, yeah.
Comfortable,
Yeah.
very comfortable. Yeah.
And it's
No
about
rush.
it's there's no rush exactly. It's a long, stable,
Mhm.
life enhancing
That's right.
relationship.
Yeah.
You went on to found your own company. Is that right?
Yeah. After doing, well, because I've been doing distribution thing for like 25 years. I was get tired of it. I mean, because distribution is just buying things from somebody and selling it to somebody. It's a middle distribution, so doesn't produce any value into the market. So I was tired of just doing that. So I wanted to be more in a producer side. That's why I quit my job as a wholesaler and started a company who does a marketing consultation for the breweries. And that's not for a long time, only 4 years. But for that 4 years, I worked with several breweries, and a very, very good experience to know about the market, which is, if you work from the distribution point of view, and if you work from the brewery side of view, it's that the world looks quite different. And being in the maker side was very, very good experience. Yeah.
And did it give you a different understanding about the needs that need to be addressed maybe in the wider sake community and in the sake market to sort of reverse the decline of the sake market and to help rebuild it? Did it give you a better insight to how we could do things better?
Well, the change has begun in these several decades, I think. And the biggest shift change was the change of the generation of the breweries, I think. That's the biggest thing which has happened in these 20 or 30 years. And that change have changed the quality of sake itself totally. Because, sake used to be made by a toji-san, which is a seasonal worker. And toji-sans, well, there are many good toji-sans, but they're hired brewers, and their most important job is to make something good, not the best. If the quality is good, it's okay. They don't challenge. They don't need to challenge. But the younger generation now often are the son of the breweries, and as they're the son of the breweries, they can challenge everything, and they can do he wants to make.
Or daughters of the breweries in the face of Imada Shuso.
That's right.
Yeah. So your family is part of that new movement, part of that change.
Yeah. Maybe one of the first change, I think. Yeah.
Indeed, for someone who's was so reluctant to be part of the sake community, it's been a big full circle.
Yeah.
Really for you, hasn't it?
Well, I have seen her challenge for a long time, so I can't say it easily, but it's a long time struggle for her.
And we are grateful for the struggle that she puts in year after year, most definitely. Those of us who have been living in Japan, those of us who have been in the sake industry, saw and felt this movement, saw and felt this change. I do remember it changing as well. When would you sort of pinpoint that change? What sort of dates around was it?
I think it's 14 days. Takagi-san was the change, I think. That's a key point of these several decades. That's a big change.
Can you explain? A lot of listeners won't know what Takagi Brew or 14 is.
Well, 14 is a very famous brand. made by Takagi Brewery in Yamagata Prefecture. And at that time, well, that was in 90s, I think.
1996.
Six
Yeah.
or so. Yeah, at that time, the whole industry is declining, and they couldn't imagine about the bright future at that time. And his father was the 14th generation's brewery, and he told his son that he was gonna quit the brewery because there is no bright future in the future. But the son, the Akitsuna son, was studying in the Tokyo University of Agriculture, the brewing. So he wanted to, he wanted to try something before quitting the job at the brewery. So he asked his father to let him make his own sake. And he did it, and it happened to be a very, very big hit.
And I believe he was only 26 years old.
I think so. Yeah, I met him at that time, but there is no Juyondai brand. His name card says Asahitaka, which is
the old family brewery.
Old family brewery brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know who he was.
So for those who don't know, Juyondai means 14th generation. So
That's
I
right,
believe
that's
he
right.
named it for his
And
father.
the important part of the story is that he made a very, very different type of sake. And before him, the good sake is said to be Tande Karakuchi, which is typical Niigata style, light and dry type of sake, being a good sake. But what he made was a totally different type of sake, which is rich and a little sweet sake type of sake.
Aromatic
style.
Yeah. If it was a wine, it would probably be a Riesling or a Gewürztraminer or something.
That's right. It's interesting that it was a very, very big hit.
So he made a great sake, but to carry on your point, he made the transition into the brewery and took responsibility for brewing.
And he gave a dream for the younger generation that the younger generation can do something good and can be successful in the future. It's a good dream to have.
It's amazing that history has just happened in such a short time. You know, that
That's right.
huge renaissance within the sake community itself.
Yeah, I think so.
It's such a monumental shift, but we were witness to it,
Yeah.
which is so fortunate, because I think perhaps today people that are coming into the sake industry or starting their sake journey come across the word kuramoto toji, owner and master brewer. Quite often. It's now common, every other brewer seems to be also, the owner of the brewery seems to also be the master brewer. And we take it for granted, I think. But that only just recently, that change really came about in the last 2 decades, basically.
Yeah.
So now your activities are very much focused on promoting and providing opportunities for people to experience sake, to get to know the breweries, get to know the regions where the sake is produced, to deepen their understanding of sake. Looking at the sake industry where we are now, how would you describe the sake industry? And you've had a long view of this industry from a child to now. Where do you think we are in the sake industry at this stage?
Well, there are so many things we have to do now in me. And especially, I'm very much curious about regionality of sake. Is quite important for the future of sake.
Why is regionality important for you?
Well, basically, sake has a regionality, in my opinion. And, regionality means the diversity and the chances for the small regional brewery to survive if they, do good. And regionality, I've always thought that Japan is like, if I compare to other country like Italy, I think, Japan is a long island country, and the climate is quite different from north to south, and it's like Italy. And in Italy, each prefecture has a different type of grapes and different type of foods, and it's really enjoyable traveling, eating, this kind of thing. So that's the same thing in Japan, I think. So the food in the Hokkaido northern area and the food in the Kyushu southern area is very, very different. And sake is always paired with the food. So basically, sake has a very strong regionality. But for these years, we are not too much sensitive about thinking about the regionality, and only goes to the brand itself. So people know about the brand, but they didn't think too much about the region. The brand is, people knows Dasai or Juondai or Guheiji, but they never care about which region they come from. Not too much about it.
So how can we, or how are you trying to create more awareness about regionality and experiencing sake within a region and enjoying all of those complementary cultures and experience that come with enjoying regional sake?
Well, one thing very important for us to promote is a GI, geographical indication kind of thing, because it's to make a rule. And to make a rule, we need lots of discussions among the region, and it's going to take a long time, but we need lots of discussion,
but also if you can come to an understanding, a group consensus, it will create a template that will enable brewers to really effectively market and promote not only their individual sake and their individual brands, but also the craftsmanship and the resources and the environment of their local area.
Because that makes easier for the foreign people to understand about sake. Thinking about my experience, when I learned about wine, I studied from the region, right? And if you learn about the region, you can imagine about the quality of the wine there. Many stories to a very small region too. But so the regionality makes people understand about sake more and more easily, not only for the foreign people, but also for the domestic people, I think.
And also it makes people understand that sake is more than just an SKU. It's more than just a product. There's actually much more that surrounds it. And
that's right.
That creates added value to the sake, right?
I think so.
So
which other people can't, imitate.
Indeed. So, well, I've learnt so much. I really am going to be following up on that live to air East Wind revival concert.
Thank you.
I've got a good memory.
Wow.
And I feel so honoured to have heard your story. And thank you so much for sharing so much of your time with us and so much of your knowledge with us as well. And for sharing so many moments of great insight with us.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. I enjoyed the time talking with you.
Thank you.
Tell me you were in a prog rock band. Are you kidding?
And that is a wrap on one more episode of Sake on Air. Thank you again so much for tuning in. If you'd like to follow along with us on social media, you can find us at Sake on Air on Twitter, Instagram, as well as Facebook. You can check us out on YouTube as well. We're gradually uploading past episodes so that those who prefer that platform can use that as well to enjoy their sake and shochu infused information. As always, this has been a broadcast from the Japan Sake and Shochu Information Center in Tokyo, and the show is made possible with the fantastic support of the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you all in a couple more weeks. Come by.